While having great content and excellent communication skills goes a long way when you're presenting to students, your presentation's design is equally as important. So referencing design principles can help you to enhance the comprehension of your audience and ensure that your message is delivered clearly and effectively, as well as help make your presentation look good overall. So some of these principles you would have heard of already in some way, but nevertheless, this session may just be a good reminder or a refresher on some elements to consider in your next presentation design. So first, the basics, just so that we're all on the same page from the beginning, let's look at what design principles are exactly. So most of you probably know already, the principles of design are basically a set of guidelines adopted by modern designers, from architects to graphic designers and everyone in between. They're adapted to shape the design process to produce a result that encompasses both aesthetic appeal and functionality in design. Now, there's a lot of debate over how many principles officially exist, since each field of design requires new factors to think about. But today, as I'm weary of your time, we'll just touch on 4 basic ideas that are most relevant to presentation design. So first up, we have visual hierarchy. Visual hierarchy is one of the most critical principles of design. It refers to the order of importance of your presentation content. So when it comes to your presentations, visual hierarchy can help to highlight what the audience should focus on first by giving certain design elements prominence over others. Basically, it requires you to think about which parts you want to stand out most and which are less important. So we're going to look at 5 basic ingredients of visual hierarchy, and by manipulating any of these 5, you can improve visual hierarchy in your presentation design. First up, we have size. So people will pay attention to the biggest elements of your composition first. So play around with large or small element sizes. Make sure that important details are larger in size than the rest of your written content. For example, something like this would be much better than something like this. As you can see, by increasing the size of certain text, you can create an emphasis on those points on the page and make it clear to the viewer that this is important. Just to note as well, the text used in these examples are lorem ipsum, which is just placeholder text. Next up is weight. Play around with our light element weight. So while this does work well, you could push it a step further and add a bold font weight in part of your headings and your subheadings to help make important text in your design stand out even more. Then we have color. So when you're designing a PowerPoint presentation, choosing colors shouldn't just be about what looks pretty. Try to use color with purpose. So having something like this compared to something like this, for example, by using high contrasting colors, you can really make important text and icons get noticed. You can also use colors to link certain elements visually, like done so here, where the percentage shown on the left has additional side notes, which is also highlighted in the purple color. So colors can be used quite effectively in presentation design. The next factor to consider to help improve visual hierarchy is positioning. So play around with prominent and not so prominent positioning. An element's position within a design says a lot about its level of importance. So for example, by simply placing your heading at the top of the page, the reader can tell without any explanation that this is indeed the header or title, followed by your explainer text or copy, which could also be a set of bullet points, and then your diagram or image below. So this works better visually than something like this. For example, where the viewer might struggle to see the title of the slide, things are positioned so far apart that there's uncertainty about whether the text is linked to the image. So it's very simple stuff, but sometimes it is overlooked. So just make sure to consider where you place things on a slide. Things at the top of the slide is usually read first. Lastly, we have the use of all caps. So play around with all caps or sentence case. So something, excuse me, like this work better than, say, something like this. So we're bringing together the use of all caps here, as well as other elements, like mentioned before, like color and positioning. So in order to help highlight the level of importance of things on your slide. So just to recap, the trick is just to understand what is the most important message on your slide. Then play around with size, weight, color, positioning, and the capitalization of your text in order to draw your viewers' attention to the most important parts of your slide. So the next design principle is white space. And white space is basically the blank space around the elements on your PowerPoint slide. So these could include logos, shapes, pictures, text boxes. And the principle of white space supports the idea that less is better because it does allow you to simplify your slide and focus your viewers' attention on the essential aspects of it. So for example, something like this, where a slide is densely packed with information without a single white space, could become something like this. Rather than trying to cram everything into one slide, try to divide your content across 2 slides. So breaking the text down into smaller parts or chunking the text would help here. And it really does make a difference in just ensuring better reading performance or experience for your viewer overall. Just to highlight too, that white space doesn't necessarily need to be white. It can be any solid color, even a blurred image background, so long as there is breathing space around the elements on your slide. So let your design and content breathe. Use white space to separate sections and create space between elements to avoid crowded and chaotic slides. This also just helps reduce cognitive overload as it pushes you to break down information presented into more digestible pieces. So our third design principle is repetition and consistency. The repetition design principle refers to the use of similar or identical elements throughout the design. So this could refer to colors, use of patterns or fonts, images and textures, etc. So repetition helps you to achieve consistency, and together this can help breed familiarity between your viewers and your presentation designs. So to achieve repetition and consistency, consider the following in your next presentation design. The first is font. Don't use more than 3 different fonts in the same presentation. Ideally, I choose for your headings and one for your body copy. This could come from the same font family, but you could play around with text weights to improve hierarchy, as spoken about before. Consistent headings can help create unity across a slide deck. The second is layout. Do maintain a consistent design and format to your PowerPoint design. So this might include considering how you align things or where you place things. The third thing to consider is color. Do use the same set of colors or a color theme in your PowerPoint design. So try to choose colors that will help make your presentation look pleasing to the eye, but that's also easy to read and easy to follow. So colors that are consistently used and with purpose as well just creates a more connected look among slides and generally creates a better overall experience for the viewer. Lastly, we have style. So don't mix various graphical styles or design elements in your PowerPoint design. Consider the style of your icons that you might use in your presentation, for example. Maybe it's an organic hand-drawn style. Maybe it's a polished vector icon style. So try to stick to one style of icon. The same applies to shapes, photos, and even patterns that you might use in your presentation design. So when you choose graphical styles or design elements, enhance consistency in your presentation design by just trying to use one style. So just an example here of 3 slides from the same slide deck. You can see an inconsistent use of fonts, slide layout, color, and style here. And in contrast, something like this would work better. As you can see, repeating the font, the size of text even, using certain colors repeatedly and placing items in the same sort of area. It can help keep the consistency throughout your presentation design. So just to recap, try to implement repetition and consistency. Consider the font, layout, and color theme, and graphic color or design elements of your presentation design. So our last design principle for today is alignment. Considering alignment is being conscious of where you place your elements. So alignment can help you to organize your design elements on your slide to create a better visual connection. So where repetition is more concerned with elements across a deck of slides, alignment is about obtaining unity among elements on a single slide. So for example, when elements on a slide are used without structure, logic, or purpose, you end up with a chaotic or disconnected look. So try to tidy groupings of similar items together and ensure, for example, that your headings, descriptions, and icons are aligned and evenly distributed on your slide. So you can imagine using vertical or horizontal lines to align the elements on your slide. A useful one is to turn on the grid line setting in your PowerPoint view tab option, or use the alignment tool in PowerPoint to help you better align things on your slide. So just try to remember to group and align similar items together, vertically or horizontally, and ensure that they are evenly spaced across your slide. This will make it easier for your viewer to scan the slide, create connections between icons and text and other graphics, and just grasp key concepts better. So that's the end of my part. I hope that that was helpful, or at least will be useful for your next presentation design. You'll notice as well that these design principles can work across any form of visual communication as well, such as PDFs or handouts that you might be putting together just once you get the hang of it. So thanks so much for listening. I will hand you over to my colleague Ruth now. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. That was great. I think as a graphic designer, you always have some type of benefit when it comes to putting content together, have a little bit of an advantage. I'm a graphic designer myself, and I find that designing slides is something I really enjoy. I get stuck into the design part and not so much the chunking part. So what I'm going to show you is a couple of examples of how to chunk your content. I just need to share my screen here. So practical tips for lecturers to split up their content. Okay, I'm just getting the right screen here. There we go. Can you see my screen, Christina?
Yep, all good.
Okay, I'm going to turn off my camera so that I don't see myself. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to run through some tips with you. If for any reason my sound drops or anything like that, Christina's just going to interrupt me. Feel free to add any questions into the chat function in the webinar, as well as YouTube, and I'll try my best to get back to you. I'm going to go through a couple of tips that will help you as a lecturer to split up your content and make it maybe a little bit more interesting for your students, and maybe assist you if you have to go to a presentation at a conference, or maybe you need to sell some ideas to top management. But this is mainly things that will help you as a lecturer, and they are also tips that you can perhaps teach your students to give them ways to easily present their content with a little bit of animation, a little bit of motion graphics. But just bear in mind that when you are presenting, to not include too many things that are going to distract your students. As Christine said, less is more, white space is good, And what I've done in my part of the presentation is try to stick to the visual tips that Christina has given us. So the first tool that I'm going to go through is the Morph tool. And what I'll do is I'll show you how the tool works, and then I'll give you a demo of how to do it yourself. As you know, everything is being recorded, so you can go back and try the tool again for yourself and maybe play back this presentation at a slower rate and pause it, and it will just help you to go through the tips. So this is a tool that's handy if you are perhaps a lecturer that is lecturing a process, a system engineering lecturer, and you want to show your students a series of events. As you can see, if you had to see this on screen, this would be very confusing. There'd be too much information on the screen, but you want to split up the content without having to divide this up into a whole bunch of pictures. So you can work through the content in that you show the process to the students step by step and talk to each of the steps instead of speaking to that big slide that's got a whole lot of information in, and it might get lost in a lecture venue. People at the back won't be able to see the information. However, if you split up the content into different steps, they'll be able to see it whether they are in a lecture venue or whether they are working from, having a remote lecture. So how you can do this, and first and foremost, you're going to have an image that you insert into your slide. So you insert your picture, you'll find your picture in your file that you've pre-saved, and you'll insert the image here. The next thing that you need to do in the step is to duplicate the slide. So I'm copying and pasting it. I have a shortcut, Apple C, Apple V. I'm working on a Mac. And you go to the slide, you click on the image, you take one of these corner boxes, hold down Shift so that the image scales at so it doesn't distort, and you scale it bigger to where you would like the next step of the process that you'd like to see. This can be used for any subject matter where you're describing a process, or maybe even a very complicated illustration that you'd like to break the content up into various steps in the process. The next thing that you need to do is, it's very important to duplicate the slide, but go into transitions, which you can find at the top toolbar. And underneath transitions, you can select Morph. And the Morph tool is the one that is going to get things going the way that you want. Well, to give you a little bit of motion graphics, you can change the duration on the right-hand side here. So if you would like the duration to be faster or slower, you can click here. And then you can also add a little bit of if it must happen on mouse click or if it must happen on a couple of seconds. I've added mouse click, just a quick duration of 2 seconds. And you go to the next slide, also apply the Morph tool to that. For the next step, you copy and paste your slide again. And then you can simply move the graphic around the pages. So let's see if that's worked. And there you have the first step in the process, the second step in the process, the third step. What you can do is you can also add content to the pages if you'd like to add a little bit of text to highlight options. If you want to mask some of the items, say, for example, textiles, you don't want that in there for the next step of the process, you can apply a white block over that to hide that part of it. The next thing I'm going to show you is the 3D models and how to insert 3D models into your presentation. This is something that would come into handy if you are lecturing students in, say, health sciences and anatomy or physiology, and you'd like to show them various organs and discuss them and show the organ from different angles. So let's just show you an application. You could show the organ from one side, then show it from another side and discuss what it looks like from the other side. This is also handy if you say you're working with students who are doing 3D CAD modeling or they don't have software on the machines when they're doing presentations, so they can insert their own 3D models. Let's have a look at how we do this. So in PowerPoint, there are a couple of stock images, well, stock 3D models. So what you do is you go to the top tab, you click on insert, and you'll see in your icon, in the toolbar here, 3D models. I'm going to go to the stock 3D models. Hopefully the internet connection is fast today. There are various models on the right-hand side here. You can even search your models. I'll go into the space section and insert the model. Now it's going to take a little bit of time to add the model to the presentation. Some models are bigger than others. One of the handy things is if, say, for example, you're sending notes home with your students, you can explain to them that they are able to manipulate this model themselves and have a look. And if they're doing a presentation themselves, they can even take snapshots of their model at different angles. Sometimes when you're working in 3D modeling, it takes a long time to take screenshots, adapt and manipulate the screenshots. And here's just a quick and easy way for students to do this. So what I've done in this instance, I've actually merged two tools and I've inserted 3D models, and you duplicate your slide on the left-hand side. On the next slide, you can rotate your three-dimensional model, perhaps add a couple of notes to that, and you apply the Morph tool. So let's go back to transitions, Morph, and you can say maybe you'd like to have the Morph go slower to the next slide, and again, apply the Morph tool to here, duplicate your slide, manipulate, move your little man around here in this instance, and let's see if that's how it works. And so in this instance, we've made the morph a little bit slower, so it spins around more slowly. That's just a nice way of adding a little bit of animation to your presentation without having to go too far in terms of, don't have any animation skills. If you'd like to insert your own file, you'd have to insert it as a OBJ file. I don't know too much about 3D modeling and how to export things from CAD and that, but if you'd like to insert your own stuff in OBJ works. What I would say is that it can make your presentation quite large to have 3D models in it, so just be cognizant of that. So the next tool that we have in Photoshop is icons. This is for people who need to quickly put an illustration or an icon into a presentation. They don't necessarily have the graphic design skills to draw their own images, and they can't necessarily find things online. So PowerPoint has a range of icons available to students and lecturers, and where you find it, you go into the top panel again, insert, and up here you'll see a little icon that says icon, and it'll bring a panel up on the right hand side with various icons in it. What's really nice is that you can search this for something specific, or you can work through these tabs and find something that is relevant to your subject matter. Let's say, for example, you're doing a presentation on chameleons. You can insert your little chameleon, scale it up. So again, hold down Shift, one of the corners, and scale this icon up and down. Something that's also really nice about this is that you can change the color of your icon, go to the top tab, go to your graphics fill, and change the color of your icon to whatever you would like it to be. And if you would like to find more icons, there's tools and buildings, animals, etc. You might find there are lots of things that you can use in your presentations. The next item I'm going to show you is cartoon people. Every now and then I can't seem to find them, so hopefully I'll be able to find them this time. This is very handy if, say, you are doing something that is scenario-based learning and you want to set a scene where there's a conversation between two people. You want to create a bit of narrative and storyline in your teaching. People remember things that are told in a story. And this is where you can get hold of some stock images for free, again, in PowerPoint. So let's close this tab on the right. And again, you go into your insert, you go into your stock images. So I am losing my tab again, but I would say I always seem to miss this, not find this one. So click on your icons and this tool will pop up on the right-hand side again. And on the right-hand side, there's a small little arrow with a drop-down menu. And you can find that there's cutout people. And there's also cartoon people. So I'm going to use my cartoon people and I'll put someone in. I can put in more than one cartoon person. I'm just going to insert one in this instance. And if you run through this tool, if you scroll down, you'll find that there are even faces where you can change the facial expression of someone. You can add, let me just insert the facial expression. And you can also change the background that you find people in. So I'm moving on from there. The next tool that you can have that is available again free in PowerPoint is Cutout People. So again, free stock images. We've spoken about getting stock images and things and crediting people and not stealing and lifting people's work. What's really great is that sometimes you need a bunch of characters to appear in your presentations for maybe there's a situation that you want to discuss. Maybe you need a face in your presentation so that your students will connect with it, with the content that you're learning. And again, to find this, you click on the stock images, you go into Cutout People, and what you'll find here is that you can even find a character set for different people. So let's say, for example, you want to talk about someone called Marcy. There's a whole bunch of options of Marcy in different poses, and you can insert them. I'm not going to insert it now because it takes quite a while to download, but just to highlight that you've got that option on the right-hand side there. Now, the thing with PowerPoint is that everyone is at a different level in PowerPoint. Some people are more experienced, some are less experienced. If you feel comfortable using a tool, use it, but don't necessarily use a tool for the sake of using a tool. Think about how it's going to affect the learning that you and the information that you're trying to present to your students. And, you know, is it going to distract them or is it going to enhance their learning experience? Something that will come in handy that you can perhaps suggest to your students or for yourself, if you're time pressed, you can actually dictate information into your PowerPoint presentation and then go back and clean it up. So what I'm going to do is do a small demo. So if you go, I'm just going to close that. When you are I'm working on a Mac. However, you might be in a PC, so I'll show you where to go in both instances. In a Mac, you go into Edit, Start Dictation. But the first thing you need to do here is click on a text box, go into Edit, Start Dictation, and when you start speaking, it's not doing it. Start Dictation. When you start speaking, it starts to record what you have said, full stop. You can add things like exclamation marks, and you can add things like question marks. If you would like to, let's just say that that is done. If you would like to record in a different language, what you would have to do is set that up in your initial setup of your computer. I'm not going to go into that now. If you are dictating on a PC, the top toolbar will look slightly different, but the tool will appear at the top there on the right-hand side. Dictate. Let's just move into so you can see it a little bit better. And that's what it will look like. And again, you'll be able to record your audio and it will be reasonably good. It understands my South African accent. So let's see if it understands your accent too. The next thing that you can do in a PowerPoint presentation is record audio. This is something that is handy for you if you, for example, want to expand on a point that you have spoken about in a presentation, or you would like to, you've got a diagram, you don't want to type in a whole bunch of information, you'd rather have the students listen to it. Perhaps you would like your students to listen to a story and then comment on that story. There's all sorts of applications where you can record audio into your PowerPoint presentation. You might want to add music, whatever it is. So let's see how we do this. And you go into insert audio. Let me just go here. Insert audio. You'll see it in the top tab. And you can add audio from your browser, audio from a file. But in this instance, we record audio. It pops up on the right-hand side. This is where we can record audio and insert it for our students. Stop your recording. You can discard it. You can preview your recording. So let's insert that. And what I recommend is that you give your students some instructions to tell them that there is a recording there and why they should be listening to the recording. You can change the color of this. I'm not going to go into that now. I'm going to move on to the next point. So let's close that tab. What you can also do is record your slideshow. This is something that is handy if, for example, you are going to a conference and you are not able to be there, but that they would still like you to present, and you might not necessarily have access to something like Camtasia or Screencast-O-Matic, and you would just like to quickly do something in your wherever you are. So you can record your slideshow, and I'll give you a brief demo on how to do this. So what you need to do is go to slideshow. You go into your recording. So let's go home, slideshow, record your slideshow. And what happens is you'll be faced with a screen that looks like this. When you start recording your slides, you'll be taken to a page that looks like this. You'll have a countdown, and you can simply click on the top toolbar. So in the top toolbar, you'll be able to stop and pause your recording. You'll be able to access your video, and you'll be able to also edit your recording. For example, if what's really handy about it is that if you've recorded and made an error on one slide to the next slide, you can dispose of that recording on that specific slide and re-record. Or you can even insert slides from another PowerPoint presentation where you've done a bit of pre-recording and include it in the presentation that you are busy working on. So the next thing we're going to look at is checking accessibility. And although I haven't set up my presentation with accessibility, you'll see that this will highlight areas where I have not necessarily set my presentation up correctly, so that all students are able to access my presentation, and that people who have screen readers are able to have the presentation read to them for whatever reason, or to insert closed captions. So where you go is you're going to review. You go into the check accessibility tab, and there are all sorts of things that you can check. You can specify things like always use subtitles in your presentation. You can even decide what languages you would like your subtitles to be. You'd need to have VTT files. I think it's VTT files, sorry. Maybe someone can put it up there in Slack, what files can be attached to closed captioning. But as you can see on the right-hand side here, it shows me all the errors that I have created in the PowerPoint presentation. And in order to amend this, it's very important to upfront create master slides where you're working with headings and subheadings, that you add alt text to your images, etc. But as you can see, it highlights all the areas where you haven't created an accessible presentation. In this instance, I haven't created an accessible presentation because I'm just doing this on screen. It's being recorded. Later on, people are going back to it. However, if there were students you were presenting and you're giving them slides afterwards, I highly recommend that you ensure that your slides are accessible. So the next thing we're looking at is compressing images, and I'll show you where to do that. And then I'll show you an example of images that have been compressed. Where you will need to do this is to make your file size a little bit smaller. Sometimes you need to send your messages across to students. The closed captionings, by the way, thank you to my colleague who sent me a message, are SRT files for closed captioning. So back to compressing images. Sometimes your PowerPoint presentations can be very large and you need to email them to students, or you need to add them to your Canvas, your learning management system. A way to do this is in PowerPoint. If you have not done it up front, what I suggest is working with PNG and JPEG files. I find PNG files, the image quality is a lot better. TIFF files end up being quite large in your PowerPoint presentation. So maybe look at inserting PNG files. You can convert and edit your files in a lot of free resources online, or you can speak to one of your colleagues who has access to something like Adobe Photoshop and that. But in PowerPoint, there is a very brief way of doing it. So what you do is you go to File. So click on the file that you want to compress the images. You go to File, and under that tab, there is an compress pictures. What you can do is you can decide what size you would like your picture to be. If it's high fidelity, 300 ppi print on screen. So in this instance, I'm going to change it to 300 ppi file size, and I'm going to select the selected pictures only. If you're in a bit time pressed, you can do all the pictures in this file. However, some pictures you might want to make them lower resolution. Some of them you might want to make high resolution. So what I've done is I've compressed some of the images already so that you can see the quality. And between 300 ppi and 220 ppi and 150 ppi, there's not much difference. But once you get down to 96 ppi, which is usually for when you want to email your presentation out, you can see there is a slight variation. It's not so apparent in this image as it is an organic image. So I'll show you what happens when you have more of a technical drawing. So here is that tire production flow chart again. As you can see, this is the original that I found online. I've credited it in the bottom right if you want to go to the original image, and I've dropped it down to 96 ppi, and you can see there is a slight change in the text becomes blurry. This is the lower quality one. This is the higher quality one. So for example, if you're changing all the images in your PowerPoint presentation to 96 dpi, you might want to go back to this one and ensure that you keep it a higher resolution so that the text doesn't become blurry. The next thing I'd like to show you, again, as I mentioned before, some people know their way around PowerPoint like the back of their hand, other people don't, but just a few little tips that you can use as a lecturer. Say, for example, in a class with your students and you just want to quickly draw their attention to you and away from your presentation, you can press W on your keyboard and that will make your screen white and your students will no longer be able to see anything, as you can see. Or to go back, you press W again. Or if you'd like to make a black screen, you press B and you can make your screen go black. And to go back, you press B again. Then the next tool that I want to show you, sorry, is the laser pointer. So I'm working on a Mac and I press Command L for my laser pointer. And as you can see, the laser pointer comes up there. And to get out of it again, I press Command L again. However, down at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a little pencil here, and you can choose a laser pointer, a pen, or a highlighter. So to quickly get the pen tool, again, you can press Command P, or you can come down to the bottom here. And when you select your pen tool, you can change the color of the pen, and you can annotate your presentation, and so that you can highlight a couple of points to your students. And when you escape from this, you can actually save these annotations. However, I'm not going to keep them. I'm going to discard them because I don't want, last time I did this, it took a very long time. And then the last thing that I want to show you, my number one top tip, is this wonderful Cameo video. So maybe there's some time in your presentation that you would like your students to see your lovely face, and you'd like them to be connected. Maybe you're recording your presentation and you want to create a little, welcome to Design Tips 101. My name is Ruth Fox, and on the left-hand side, you can have a couple of points of what you're going to be introducing to your students. So, and it's not always just for students, it's wherever you want to use it. So I can turn the camera off there. Where you find this, you go into Insert, and then on the right-hand tab, there's Cameo, and it will automatically bring the Cameo up here. It'll place it down at the bottom of the screen. You can place it wherever you want in the screen. You can change the shape of your Cameo. So I'm going to become a little sun, ray of sun. You can scale it up, you can scale it down. And if you want to automatically have your Cameo appear, you click on the video so that when you're running through your presentations, there you are. Hello, I'm in the sun. And you can turn it off. What I would recommend is make sure that you don't put it in front of something else, because then students will not be able to see the information that appears behind your little Cameo sun. So that's all for now. Thank you very much. Just like to thank Christina for her part of the presentation and for the assistance with the live stream. As I mentioned before, if there are any questions, you're welcome to put them into the Slack channel, or you can add them to the web, to the, the YouTube. So what I'll say is thank you very much to everyone who's attended. You'll see on our YouTube channel that there are a couple of other videos talking about graphics for presentations, graphics for teaching. There's things relating to accessibility. And this afternoon, there'll be another webinar. You can stream it live.